All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started because I think most of you are here. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making the time tonight. This is our last Ellie's info session for year 5. My name is Amanda Bradley. I'm the programming senior manager here at Oolight Arts. The Ellies are Miami's Visual Arts Awards. Over the last 4 years, Oolight Arts has supported over 180 artist projects with $2 million in funding for artists living in Miami-Dade County. This year, we're back again, offering up a share of $500,000 to artists who want to apply with bold ideas for projects they'd like to realize. Today, later on in the presentation, I'll be joined by Luna Goldberg, who is a 2020 Ellies winner. She will give you all her tips and tricks on how she got her Ellies award, what her application looked like, and what the process and final presentation of her project was. I just want to say that anyone who has any questions, you can drop it in using the Q&A function at the bottom of the presentation or the Zoom screen. Otherwise, you can also put them in the chat. We'll try and get to as many of them as we can once we get through the info session. So we'll go ahead and take it away. So I want to start by showing you some previous Ellie Award-winning projects. This is 2020 winner Barbara Fernandez, who did a Growing Transparency, which was a light and sound projection project at the Deering Estate. This is 2020 winner Mark Floridor, who did 2 public murals in collaboration with Fringe Projects in downtown Miami. And this is 2020 winner Clara Varas, who did a solo exhibition at Spinello Projects. And this is 2019 winner Neil Bordeaux, whose project was to produce a series of comic books using Florida comic artist called Spiny Orb Weaver. All right, so most importantly thing to know is there's less than 1 week to apply to the Ellies. Applications are due on Monday, May 16th at 6 p.m. 6 p.m., not midnight. It's really important that if you guys do have any questions that you ask them today, we'll also drop an email in the chat so you guys can send any questions you have after the presentation if you want to ask them on a private channel. This is Lincoln Road, back when Oolight Art Center South Florida was originally founded in 1984. And we'll talk about the categories of the Ellies. So there are 4 categories: the Creator Award. Oh, sorry, it's skipping. Teacher Travel Grants. And then 3rd is the Michael Richards Award, which is a nomination-based award. And the Ellie Social Justice Award, which is also a nomination-based award. Most of you who are tuning in tonight are probably looking to apply to the Creator or Teacher Travel Grant Award. So the application. For the Creator Award, we ask for 300 words on what do you want to do, what it is that you're proposing, what will you use the Ellie's funds for, who you are as an artist via your CV, and 3 images, either of previous work that helps show us what your project is about, or it could be a sketch, it could be a video, but kind of illustrating what this project is. And for teacher travel grants, again, 300 words, where do you want to go and why? And then also a CV. And then I want to welcome Luna to join me to talk about her project, because I know you guys will probably have more specific questions as to what her application looks like or looked like back in 2020.
Hi everyone, I'm Luna and it's great to be with you today. So the project that I applied with for the Ellies was a project called At Memory's Edge. And it was really a project that was multidimensional. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was looking for the Ellies. I was looking for something that would fund a project that could have an exhibition component. Like in this slide, we see some of the works from the exhibition, but also that had other elements like a panel discussion. I brought in some artists for a residency, and the final component was a publication. And one of the greatest things about the Ellies for me was this flexibility to really build something for myself outside of an institution. I think there's so many funding sources that require you to apply through a nonprofit or a fiscal sponsor. And so it's really just a gift to work within an organization or a grant that doesn't have a lot of tight parameters. So it's really a space where you can explore. Amanda and the Oolight team works with you to kind of pivot, in my case, because I was awarded the Ellies during COVID. And so when I had applied, we weren't living that experience just yet.
Right. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the Creator Award. So the grants range from $2,500 to $25,000 in award amount. Luna, how much did you get for your Ellies?
So I received $6,000 for my Ellies.
Cool. And can you talk a little bit about how you proposed this project? What did your 300 words consist of, and what were your 3 images?
So I think one of the most challenging aspects of grants are usually these really extensive applications that require all of these details, right? Maybe you need a rendering, maybe you need a budget. The Ellies really simplifies that because they're looking for 300 words. But 300 words is also difficult because it's a short amount of space. And so I think one of the best pieces of advice I would give is to write your 300 words in a format and way where other people, no matter their field, even if they're coming from outside the arts, can understand what you're proposing. So really simplifying language. This is in a space, like I don't think you need to go all out with jargon, and really a space where you could answer, like, what is this project? What does it look like concretely to a certain extent? Why is it important? And how are you going to realize it? I think those are the key elements to bring into those 300 words.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about like what you mentioned in structuring the language and being like really accessible in the way that you described the project. So the tips I always give people who are applying for the Creator Award is like your first sentence should paint the picture. So I am proposing a series of works. I am proposing a performance that. So how can you start at the forefront and really illustrate what it is they can start to build this narrative of with like the description and the background and the CV and then the visuals. So I always encourage artists to really just define it at the forefront. You know, is it a series of paintings? Is it a performance? Is it a video? Is it a film? I think that really helps with having that additional language that follows it.
And I think, Amanda, that's also something to note because, again, like you're not submitting a budget for the Ellies. You're getting a grant, but you don't know how much. So it's important to kind of bring in scale to a certain extent through that language and to name what it is you're trying to do.
Right. Well, I want to open it up to questions from the audience. If anyone has any specific questions on the grant, you can go ahead and submit them in the Q&A. That way we can read them. Okay, I do have a question from Philip. I already submitted my application, but would like to resubmit after watching this video. Is that okay and or allowed? So there is a capacity and submittable for you to withdraw an application. So if you go into your submissions under submittable, you can withdraw the application you already submitted and submit a new one. We won't jury any of the applications that have been withdrawn by the recipient. So yes, you can go ahead and do that. Luna, I have a question for you from Alana. What type of media did you include in your application?
That's a great question. For my application, I was working with a few artists. I was working with 4 artists, and essentially, this exhibition consisted of all new works. And so I think something that I really struggled with is how do you find images that are representative of the project, even if they're different things? So I included one past curatorial still from another project, and then 2 works by the artists that I was working with.
I have a question from Lisa. How important is a public component to the grant versus developing a new body of work? So I can take this one. So the Ellies, we don't require this project that you submit to have any sort of community engagement or public component. We do want some sort of presentation. So for example, if you are going to submit for a new body of work, maybe it becomes an exhibition. Maybe if you're applying for an artist book, there's some sort of launch or event around, kind of the final creation that you're proposing. But we don't necessarily require that you have some sort of community engagement, and the projects also don't have to occur in Miami. You have to be a Miami-Dade artist, but the projects can happen anywhere. I hope that answers the question, Lisa. Once the grant is awarded, does Oolight provide studio space for the work to be completed? We do not. We definitely don't have enough studio space. As I mentioned, we've funded over 185 projects in the last 4 years. So this program is specifically to allow artists to have some funds to make the work. And I will say that Ellie's is a support grant. It's not always the sole funder. I think in some cases, the grants do allow the artist to fully complete the work, but in other cases, and I think Luna can speak to this too, the Ellies does allow you to leverage a relationship with another funding institution or a presenting institution that, for example, where Luna had her exhibition. But Luna, can you talk a little bit about how you were funded by other institutions as well?
Absolutely. So, yeah, the project that I was working on needed a much larger budget than the Ellies. And so I actually got support from Locust Projects through their Wavemaker grant. I got a grant through the New World School of the Arts Alumni Foundation. And I also partnered in the community. I worked with the Fountainhead Residency program, and the show itself was at Fundación Pablo Chugari. So I think we have a really lovely community of arts institutions here in Miami, and they often collaborate, right? And I think it was a really great way to engage different organizations to fill in some of the gaps. Like I needed a space for a residency to bring in artists, but I didn't have the funding to necessarily get a hotel, right? So there are ways that you could really use the Ellies and other grants to leverage and create new collaborations.
Yeah, I've seen it in so many projects over the last 4 years. Because like I said, sometimes the project initially starts small, and then the moment you get funds, the idea kind of expands. So I think the Ellies and the support that you get, behind the scenes really allows you to go out and ask for additional funds or say, hey, I have this project, it's funded by Oolight. Would you be interested in showcasing this exhibition? We are getting flooded with questions, so I'm going to keep moving. But if we don't necessarily you don't get your full answer, feel free to submit another one. I have a question from Tori. Should the 300 words address the potential to do more with a larger grant or scale back with less funding? I think propose the project that is your intention. I think that the decision to scale back will come in time. I think that it might not necessarily be totally tied to funding, because like I said, I think you might get 5,000 with the Ellies and be able to get another 5 from another funding institution. But I think you should always apply with the idea that is your true intention. But Luna, I don't know if you have any feedback on that.
Yeah, I think, again, the staff is really there to help and support you. I had so many conversations with Amanda during this time around, like, I'm looking for a space, I need some partners, do you have any suggestions? I was gonna have a full-blown symposium as part of my exhibition and project. And then with COVID, that was kind of something that I had to let go of. So then I had a few smaller panels and tours. So I think there's space for flexibility there. But proposing the project you want to see is probably key.
Yeah. I'm going to jump around in the questions a bit. How many proposals do you recommend submitting? So we don't put a cap on how many you can submit, but we do recommend no more than 3. I think as a reader and the jury, once you submit 10, they become a little bit confused as to which project you're most passionate about. I would say submit your time and energy into the proposal that you're most passionate about and most ready to do. But you can submit as many as you want. I would submit no more than 3. And then would also love to know what extent films, especially experimental films, fall within the parameters of the visual arts. So we as an institution have a support program for specifically film and cinematic arts. We have a program run for it. We have a residency. We do open calls all the time. And we do, commissioned projects through that. There are previous Ellies winners who have done film projects, whether that be writing a script or creating a short documentary or an animation. We do fund and filmmakers are encouraged to apply, but we do offer a completely separate kind of branch of our institution to supporting filmmakers in Miami. And if you want to send an email, I can also connect you with our cinematic arts manager for that. Does the project have to be focused on artists if filmmakers and artists are creating the project? I'm not sure I understand that question, Carl. I don't know if you can resubmit so that we can take that. I do have a few questions from a teacher, which I can try and take. Hi, I'm a full-time teacher, so I don't have an artist resume. I am kind of nervous about this part of the application. Do you have any tips? You're, I assume, submitting for a creator grant as a teacher rather than a teacher travel grant. So I would encourage anyone on here who's kind of curious as to what a CV should look like or what to include to go on our YouTube channel. In 2020, we did a program called the Artist Toolbox on what is a CV, how to write a project description, and all of those programs and tutorials and tips live online. So if you go onto our YouTube channel, there should be a playlist that has all of those professional development workshops we did. And it can give you a bit more information as to what people look for in a CV, but I would say don't be discouraged by it. I think at the end of the day, the first thing that someone's going to read is what you're proposing and what your visuals are. I think if you can illustrate that you have the means to produce this project, that's the best thing you can do. I think artists, defining an artist is a very difficult thing to do. And I don't necessarily think that a CV always does that. So I would say don't be discouraged and take a look at some of the online resources that we have up on our YouTube channel. Is the teacher travel grant only for classroom teachers or informal educators eligible? Right now, the teacher travel grant is open for K through 12 educators in schools in Miami-Dade County. So informal, unfortunately, is not eligible for that grant. But if you're an artist, I encourage you to apply for a creator award. I promise I'm not looking off to the side. I'm managing multiple screens with questions. Does the Ellies help you find a place to exhibit your work, or does that need to be established before submitting an application? Luna, do you want to take that one?
I can take that. So as Amanda said, there have been over 100 Ellies winners, and there's not enough infrastructure, I don't think, for them to get that hands-on with everyone. So of course, like, I had many conversations with Amanda and the team at Oolight, but really it is up to you to kind of find a space for this and for programs if you are looking for an exhibition. at the point of my application, I didn't have a space. And with COVID, it shifted over time. I had one committed space and then it fell through and another space closed. And so really I was knocking on doors, which is always great. It's good to show up and get to know these different spaces. It can be a challenge. And I think the big challenge is if you're working within a time frame. So that's something that could be a little difficult and maybe leads to another question.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't necessarily commit to finding you a space. This program specifically is really like helping fund projects, but I did, suggest a bunch of spaces to Luna, not that I could have confirmed those for her, but if you do want suggestions and you're not really familiar with how the gallery system or other institutions work, like I think I'm always happy to have a conversation regarding that. But we also don't require that your application or that your project have a committed space when applying. We're funding ideas, and ideas change and they change form and scale. So we're not requiring that anyone who's applying for an exhibition or a creator award have a completed or letter of acceptance into a space at the forefront. I did get another question back from Carl. Does a film or documentary have to be about the arts, or can it be about any topic? It can be about any topic. We consider film an art form, which it is. So it can explore anything. It can be narrative, documentary, short or feature length. Submit what you're most passionate about, but it can take any form. Are digital renderings better received to portray what we aim to create, or is the writing portion plus existing work more encouraged? I don't think that there's a exact equation for that. I think that it's a mix of both. So I would say what a sketch or rendering shows is that you've really thought through what you're proposing if it's the first time that you're proposing something of this scale or of this kind of media that you're working in. I do think being able to show previous work maybe in a similar fashion can be helpful. But like I said, I think the biggest thing is at the forefront describing what it is you're doing and using those 3 examples to really illustrate your project. Luna, do you have any suggestions or ideas? I know you've also received other grants outside of the Ellies, so I'm not sure if you've ever submitted renderings or.
I have not. I'm not great with technology, but some grants really do submit them. I think for me, in terms of practice, like I want to showcase different scales of projects that I've worked on, because when you're creating something new, you never know what that final result will look like. So that's my rule of thumbs, but of course there's so much you could do. And if that's a skill you have, maybe it's worth looking at.
Right. I agree. I have a question here. Would it hurt your application to designate a proposed budget for your project, even if Oolight can only fund a portion of that budget? It will not hurt your application. We have received projects that do include a number somewhere in the narrative, and it doesn't hurt the application at all. So feel free to submit that if you would like. I just think 300 words is like Luna said, it's really hard to fit everything in. So don't feel pressure to include that if that's kind of keeping you up at night. We have a lot of questions, Luna, so thanks for sticking around. I have a question from Cassandra. What is the expectation for Oolight Arts involvement once a grant is awarded? Will you help with marketing, guidance, or is it meant to be entirely self-contained, awardee managed, or up to the recipient? Luna, I'll let you take that one.
So Oolight is really involved. Like there are some stipulations to the grant, like many organizations, around branding, right? All of the ephemera, has to be some acknowledgements. But I think for me, with this project that had so many different components, Oolight was a great source of support for getting the word out. And so when the artist came to town and started at Fountainhead, that was something that they promoted. When we had a first talk, they promoted it as well. And even down to like when the exhibition was almost over, I didn't have a lot of support for documentation and I was out of funds. So they helped kind of document the show as well. So there are different support structures and of course requirements for the grant, but they're all the requirements I would say are pretty manageable and straightforward.
And then I have another question for you, Luna. Can you tell us a bit about what the Ellies did for you as an artist? For example, were there opportunities that arose after your exhibition? I'm sure you're working on other projects now.
So I would say I'm still in that moment of feeling it out. My exhibition and Ellie's project really closed. It closed in February, so it was just a few months ago. I think it was a really great way to get to know the community in a different way. And so there have been other projects that are starting to take shape, new collaborators, things like that. Or I've also given talks. I think the ICA approached me to give a talk with their teen program about the project, different things like that. And so I think that was a really nice way to elevate the project and also see where it'll take me next.
Okay. I have another question. My project includes collaborators, writers, filmmakers, but I'm still unsure who they will be. Should I mention potential names and their function or focus on the practical aspects of the project? You can mention others. I will say though that the Ellies is an individual artist grant. So whoever's name is on the application is going to be the winner. They're going to be credited as the winner. The funds will go to that individual. We know that artists work collaboratively a lot. And I think once you're awarded the grant, you can bring on individuals and manage that relationship on behalf of the project. A lot of projects have involved other artists. I think a lot of Ellie's winners collaborate sometimes. But as far as who will be the recipient will be that primary applicant. I think you can go ahead and mention them, but if they're not confirmed, maybe I would say focus more on what the project is and why it's important and why, why this should happen now. Right. Are video uploads of artwork encouraged? Yes. So we ask for 3 work samples. They can be 3 images or 3 videos. They can be 1 image and 2 videos. We just ask for no more than 3 samples just because it's a lot. It's a lot of applications. And I think that it does say something when your project can be illustrated in 300 words and 3 images. So you can definitely submit 3 videos if that's what you want, or a combination of videos and images or renderings if it's a rendering. Who selects the Ellies winners? Is the list of past jurors available online? Yes, our past jurors are available online. If you go to previous winners or you look up our previous Ellies ceremonies for the last 2 years, they've been virtual with the pandemic, and we do mention all the jurors publicly at the ceremony itself. So every year we have a jury of arts professionals, whether that be curators, arts administrators, other artists, both locally and nationally, that are selected to read and rate the applications. So every year it's a different jury. So if you've applied before and not gotten an Ellie, I encourage you to apply again. Every year, completely different set of eyes seeing your name and your ideas. Is there a set timeline that the project has to be completed within? Hi, Kelly. How are you? So yes, the grant is a 1-year grant. We hope most of the time. Obviously with COVID, there's a little bit more flexibility, or there has been in previous years, because no one was showing work, no one was going out. A lot of performance pieces had to go virtual. So it truly depends. If you're awarded an Ellies grant, what we do is you kind of set the parameter for what part of the project the Ellies will fund or what part you can complete when you set your budget. So that I think helps with timeline. For example, if you win for a film and the Ellies can only fund the script, and that's the only portion that you really talk about in the budget, that kind of sets the parameter for that part of the project being completed within the 1 year. And I hope that makes sense, but if anyone has a question on that, you can put it in the chat again. Let's see, I'm getting from chat and Q&A. We talked about CVs. We talked about teacher. Should I include a sample layout of a planned exhibition as one of the images, or do you prefer to see samples of the work itself? I don't know. I don't know. I guess we might both have differing opinions on this, but I think that the work is the most important thing because the layout is probably going to change at some point.
I think the work, I think that'll tell a better story than the layout, because I mean, unless you're doing renderings, right? There's a lot you could do with a rendering, but I would go for the work.
Yeah. Should the creator include their timeline in the application? Do the funds need to be used within a specific amount of time? We answered that. I don't think you need to talk about timeline in the project description. I really think use the 300 words to really describe the project and the intention behind it. Okay. Is current work best, or samples of range or works that are closest to direction of project? I would say whatever will illustrate your idea. If you've never worked in the way that you're proposing to work, maybe do a rendering or a sketch. I've seen a lot of people physically sketch and scan that as an example, you know, like use the tools you have, or talk to an artist that you might know that, you know, knows how to do renderings if you don't know how to. And this is like, you know, a public art proposal or something kind of out of what your normal scope is. But I really can't like encourage everyone on here enough to really try to use the 3 examples to illustrate what this might look like, whether that be through a work in a similar vein or a similar form, or through a sketch or a rendering. I think we're getting to the end of questions. If anyone has any last questions that I have missed, because I know there's a lot, please drop it in the Q&A before we close out.
Amanda, there's a question here about how you verify that Miami-Dade address.
So how do you verify my Miami-Dade address? My driver's license is my old Broward address, but I live in Miami. So we can verify through like a utility bill, a lease agreement, a tax return. It doesn't have to be your ID. I think it's preferred not to be your ID because I think people move quite often. But yes, something that ties your name to the address that you're getting in the mail would be the preferred way. Does anyone else have questions? Jacqueline, your hand is up. Do you still have a question? Do you want us to allow you to talk? If you do, just let me know and I can open your mic. Becky, how did Luna talk about where she would be exhibiting her project in 300-word project description?
So the easy answer is I did not. I talked about everything but that. I said what I wanted to do. I wanted to have an exhibition and public programming series around contested monuments. These were my collaborators. These were some of the themes I wanted to focus, and I completely left that part out, other than saying it would take place in Miami-Dade County.
Yeah. So not necessary. Like I said, we don't require that you have all the things figured out. We're really just trying to help you make this idea come to fruition. How do we submit the presentation on Monday, and what is a CV? So the Ellie's application goes through Submittable, and I will have my colleague drop the link to where you need to go to submit the application in the chat now. And a CV essentially is just kind of a history of what have you done? What exhibitions have you shown in? Have you done any curatorial projects? Has your work been published anywhere? I think Luna can probably talk a little bit about what her CV looked like and how she kind of shapes what that is. But I do encourage everyone to go on the YouTube. We do a specific program around artist bio and CV.
Yeah, so I would say for your CV, you want to have different elements that are related to your practice. So for instance, on my CV, I work in curatorial, but I also am an arts educator and I publish regularly. So those were 3 different sections that I had on there, speaking to these different elements and how they were going to help animate the exhibition.
And I see one last question. Did you first go to Spinella Projects to get your exhibition to be held there? I think that's probably in regards to Clara, who was one of the examples I showed. So Clara is actually one of the artists that works with Spinello. So I'm sure that this was an idea that she had prior, and the Ellies was allowed her to actually produce the work for the exhibition. But like we mentioned, we can't necessarily give you a space or connect you to someone that will commit to giving you a space. We can give you money and we can fund your project and we can help promote it and get people there and hype it up and hopefully help it grow into something way bigger once the project you think may be completed. Maybe Luna's exhibition might go on tour. But again, not required. I think 300 words, really, what is it that you're proposing? Why is it important? Who are you? And what might this look like? All right. Well, I think we got through that. Hopefully, I was able to answer everyone's question and as many as I can. If anyone does have any lingering questions, you can send an email to info@theellies.org. I'm also going to be answering all the questions that come in there between now and Monday at 6 p.m. And if anyone does want to talk to me one-on-one, I will have office hours on Friday. There's still a few slots left open. You can book a one-on-one 15-minute Zoom call with me. We can talk about your project and some of the questions maybe you have around what to submit in regards to 300 words and images. So we'll also put that link in the chat. Oh, it's there already. So get those 15 minutes while they're hot because they will go fast. But thank you so much, Luna. It's always great chatting with you. And we are going to take a short break and then we'll come back and chat with Gabriella Serra and Ezekiel Binns, who are also 2 Ellies winners, and they'll talk a little bit about their projects, how it's evolved, how they're going, and what will come next. So bear with us. Thanks, everyone.
Good luck, everyone, with your applications.
All right. Hi, everyone. I won't put you through the torture of introducing myself again, but we are back with Ellies Connect. Ellies Connect is a conversation series that invites previous winners of the Ellies to talk about their projects. Tonight, I'm really excited and honored to be joined by Ellies Award winners Gabriella Serra and Ezekiel Binns. I hope that you guys will participate in the conversation, so feel free to submit questions in the Q&A or the chat as we go through. And we'll take them throughout the night. So I'm just going to read a little bit of background for each of our winners, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Gabriella Serra is a multidisciplinary artist, certified restorative justice circle keeper, Reiki practitioner, and urban farmer, born in Caracas, Venezuela, and currently based in Miami. Her practice comprises filmmaking, photography, and community facilitation through workshops and support circles, and focuses on the exploration and regeneration of relationships between humans and non-humans, our bodies and the land, our present selves with our ancestral histories. With community, family, and friends, she is able to co-create intergenerational spaces and projects in which storytelling is practiced and honored, where we value the love and care of neighbors, making food and tending gardens together, where we can be vulnerable with each other. Although her art is often ephemeral, the relationships and connections formed remain transformational. Ezekiel Binns, the son of two Caribbean natives, Ezekiel was born in Miami, Florida. Utilizing his background in art and design, he explores his interests in the intersection of representation, communication, and form. After being awarded an Ellies in 2020, Ezekiel founded Jits Microfarm, a community-oriented agriculture project with his high school collaborator, Isaiah Littlejohn. So I want to go ahead and call Ezekiel and Gabriella up. Can unmute. There we go. Hello, hello.
Hey there.
Hey.
Welcome. So I want to start with you, Gabby, and just see if you can talk us through, and I'll scroll through some of these images, but just talk us through a little bit about your background in the Ellies. So you're a two-time Ellies winner. You won for a project in 2019 called Buenesas. And you won last year for this project, I think, which we have a bunch of images for, which is the Grandmother Songbook. So give us some background to what your projects are.
Thank you for having us tonight. So I did two projects with Ellies, and the first one, Buenesas, which the project continued until today. It just, like we just do different activities. But Buenesas was proposed as a series of workshops. I really wanted to, through my work in community organizing and also working with different farms, local farms, I really wanted to connect different people and neighbors so we can learn from each other. It was more out of the curiosity to, I didn't go to college. For me, doing all this learning, I like to learn, but I never I wanted to make different classrooms, and I always believed that I learned a lot from different people or plants or
Right.
by observing. So I wanted to kind of continue that that idea.
Yeah.
Let's just create a classroom right here in this park, and let's learn from the neighbor that I know that she grows this plant, and that's the idea of it. But then I also brought in different Corinne, that she has the Miami seed share that she collects and saves seeds for the community.
Mhm.
Those are images from the Buenesas. And we did it in different places, parks and Arzonas, Finca Morada, different projects in the community that that promote agroecology and
So wait,
different things.
tell us what is Buenesas. So what is it as a translation, and also what is it at its core?
Well, Buenesas for me was when I started farming, my main interest was it just seemed so strange. We were planting all these things that it took a lot of effort and care to make it survive. And for me, I was always interested in these plants that just grew without water, without anything, and then I started realizing, I mean, this is knowledge that I didn't, I just learned this, but like when I was farming, like, wow, there's so many plants that just grow by themselves that are super nutritional, that have medicinal value, that in many countries and around, in many cultures, even in my own culture, but I didn't remember, have people make money out of this or make an economy. They traded. And so for me, it was an extent, like Buenesas is how there's a movement of people calling them like good instead of maleza, which means bad, like weeds, like, because we don't take the time to really like get to know them. So for me, was, like Buenesas was that, like every workshop we talked about one Buenesas, and we prepared or made pigments together, made food, medicine, art with it.
And then your most recent Ellie's project, can you describe that one a bit?
Well, that one, like we created during the pandemic because I was with my parents. I went back to live with them, and my grandma was like my roommate right here, like for a year. So my grandma's an artist, and I never considered myself an artist because I was always working, and I never went into the art scene. So I was like, wow, wait, my grandma's an amazing artist in Venezuela. She used to do so many great things. I mean, she's a lawyer, but her passion was music and art and all these things. So she used to have this school that she would teach people that never learned how to play music. And the third age, they were all elders. And so I'm like, well, let's I wanted to continue learning about trees, native trees, and tropical trees. And I always had this idea, like, oh, I want to do like a little university of grandmas, and like have them all together. So I guess this video is the first workshop we did together. So we kind of joined all those ideas, like, oh, let's make like the music, and we'll bring grandmas, and we'll learn from the grandmas about the trees that are our relatives too. Trees are like our elders, like our grandparents. And with that, we'll create songs, because that's how, like in Latin America and the Caribbean, like we have so many songs with so much information about the trees and how people would use it. Yeah, like the significance, like so yeah, like there we're singing to the calabash tree that I didn't know that it grew in Florida too. It's just like almost an extinction, because people don't grow it anymore. But the calabash tree is like major in the other parts in America. You use it for everything. So we were creating a song together there, and it was fun. Like there's kids. The idea is that there is intergenerational. Yeah, now we can share.
And Ezekiel, let's talk a little bit about JITS. How did that come about? And what was the thought process when applying to the Ellies with this?
So JITS came about, I guess, also as a result of the coronavirus and the pandemic and staying at home and just being kind of like idle and bored. I was in architecture school, but doing it through Zoom like we are now. And I needed something to do in my spare time. So I started growing plants indoor hydroponically, just out of curiosity. And I've always had an interest in nutrition, and because my mother is like a nutritionist and a nurse, and science and biology and stuff like that. And so like I just started growing these plants at home, and like consuming them and eating them and learning about them. And then when I moved back to Miami, a few weeks into the pandemic, I brought that project down to Miami and I introduced it to my collaborator who I went to high school with, Isaiah. And we were just like, let's do this during the summer, because we were at the time really uncertain of what would take place after, or like in the next few months, because the pandemic was still pretty serious at the time. And so long story short, like we both like got racks and like started growing these things indoors, and we were like, let's create some kind of like project for ourselves that would be partially like a means of income, and then partially like a publication or some kind of community initiative where we'd be not only distributing like live organic micro produce, but also free and accessible graphic publications that are educational and like teach people about like plants and like nutrition and food and like stuff like that. So I think like similar to Gabriella's project, it came from like an interest in education and like the value of workshops and community knowledge sharing, and like public access to information, I think were some of the key things that drove us to start this project.
And I want to talk a little bit about both of your projects, because I think that they really stemmed out of Little Haiti as a community. And funny enough, when we were, discussing this earlier, to find out you guys were like pretty much neighbors working on Ellie's projects in different years from completely different conceptual points. But I do think there's a really interesting relationship to what Gabby says, like living with her grandmother in the pandemic, really creating this idea for this grandmother song workshop space. And Ezekiel, you talking a lot about like the relationship with your mom and her being a nutritionist, and like almost this kind of knowledge that's ingrained in family and in community, and how you've both found artistic and creative ways to create almost like an open source space for others to engage with it. So maybe Ezekiel, can you talk a little bit about like your interest and how your practice does that? I think through design and through study, you found ways to kind of give back in a sense. And I know that JITS is still kind of in development and underway. So this is like a nice point to talk about it, because I think it'll evolve. But what is the value of that for you as an artist, to like create something, but almost make it, give someone else the authorship of it as well, because you're giving them the information?
That's a great question. I think to respond to that, I would go back to my childhood and just the genesis of me even being interested in any of this stuff, mainly art and design and like science. Similar to the things that Gabriella has done with her Ellies, like these free workshops within communities. Like my mother, she took me to a bunch of things as a child, like the old MAM Art Museum before it was PAM in Miami. Whenever they had programming, she would take me on the weekends. Home Depot had workshops on Saturdays that like would teach you how to like make a birdhouse. And like stuff like that got me really like, I don't know, like obviously like, I don't know what it did, but obviously it did something that just like made me interested in like art and making stuff, and also like science and biology. And so for me in my head, the only way, because like when I move around Little Haiti, I just really see myself in a lot of these kids that I like pass by when I'm walking or driving through the city. And I know that there aren't like a lot of great influences that are just like openly in the air in these neighborhoods. And so, and it's really just about like kids really just need something that's interesting and compelling to like capture and inspire them to then like develop a passion that they pursue from a young age, which is kind of my story. And so I want JITS to be that for somebody's child.
Yeah. So you would say that your project is like focused on youth kind of education and engagement.
Yeah, youth. I mean, I'm kind of playing off of the adolescence part because it's also microgreens and like juvenile and like stuff like that. But ultimately I'm trying to also with the graphics and the communication and the representation, make work and make like visuals that are like accessible enough for all age groups and compelling enough for all age groups. And even in the text, one thing that you guys can see me doing on the screen is I'm going between like the 3 main languages of South Florida, which is Creole and Spanish. And that's a large part of like what this project is about, is just like, yeah, creating content that's easily digestible, not esoteric, because horticulture is very esoteric, or it can be, especially microgreens. So for me, it's kind of like, it's not that deep, but it is really pretty. So that's like, that was really it for me. I was like, it's really simple and it's really pretty. So if I can like present this in a way that's like compelling and visually interesting, I can get children and like adults and just people in general interested in like growing their own food indoors.
And Gabby, can you talk a little bit about like what that value is for you? Because yours is so workshop based, and I think too, you've probably seen it grow over the last 2-3 years now, being 2022 from when SS being funded in 2019. And you were also doing this project pre-pandemic, must I say, like right before the pandemic hit.
Oh my God.
And it seems like it still really had an impact and like a huge life during, lockdown and the pandemic itself.
Yeah, no, and even before that, like we were doing we started with semillas, which was another like workshop based like herbalism.
Mm.
But yeah, like I think everything that starts, like my approach to farming and doing community work is like, it's your in your journey, like healing, like from suffering from depression, all these things, like you do like a lot of individual work, but then you realize that this is something that you need also communal. For me, like a lot of the healing that we have to do, yeah, you can do it individually, but it's really important to have support of your community, and also to define community in these times when like we're moving so much. Like there's like I came to Miami when I was 16. I moved like 20 times, I don't know how many times, like going from place to place, like the rent gets higher or your landlord kicks you out, like all these things. So for me, like doing these workshops and at least connecting to people that regularly go, sometimes you get a lot of new people, but you also get like people that come back, and it forms like a little community, like of people that you get to like, that it's important for me. That's why like and Ezekiel, you were living next door, like your grandparent, like your grandfather. I remember Mr. Stanley, like he's like always gardening, your mom also coming from work with like herbs, and for me it was very meaningful that, a stranger inviting you, like, hey, you want to come to a workshop, and they show up, with like, for me, like doing those little things, and even if we sat down that day in the place and just talked, like that for me has a lot of meaning, like to connect with others that live nearby. And I mean, that's how I grew up, and little by little I see that it's getting a little lost because of the culture and like how we carry on with our lives, like the technology, so many things, involved.
And Ezekiel, you actually went to one of the Buenesas workshops, right? Like not knowing who Gabby was or what was happening.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like it's such a funny, because basically she had the program at this farm in like Little River, Little Haiti. I think it's called like Earth and Us. And
Yeah.
yeah, me and my mother and some friends just like found out about it. And I think I don't know if you told us about it or if I just like pulled up, but we pulled up and it was great. She taught us about like medicinal plants. Like there was this plant that was really cool to me. One of the ones that she showed us was a plant that like you would chew on and then it would make your mouth numb, and it's like a toothache like a remedy. And I think
Toothache
that
plants.
level of interaction was like really cool and like really exciting, you know. So it was a really cool time though.
Yeah, and I just left I left like, I would have like these brown bags and like write down like, hey, go to this workshop and put it on, on the cars. And I think your mom got it from her car and she read it. I'm like, oh, awesome. This works, you know, this way of inviting people over.
Yeah, yeah. And so Gabby, I remember with Buenesas, like the Ellie's proposal was really to one, host these workshops, to share information, to educate, to learn together. But I know you made a guide out of this, you know, which became like a digital takeaway. I know you had a few copies and you, I think, placed them in like local spots in
Oh,
the
the
community
neighbors,
or yeah.
from
So
the garden.
yeah, so Ezekiel, do you think with JITS you might have some sort of like takeaway or some sort of element that kind of compresses all the information gathered over a period of time that can become accessible to either the community or the youth, or like what is your kind of plan?
Yeah, so right now, like I think ultimately similar to the comic that you showed earlier,
Hmm.
it'll take a form of like an annual or like biannual, like half of it, like 2 times a year, like
Right.
publication. I really like tangible like paper products, but I definitely do see the value in being present online. And so we have an Instagram which we like make post in like informational posts that shows like recipes and like gives information about certain plants and certain like seeds and certain processes that you can check out on the Instagram. Eventually, we definitely would like to create a website that's kind of like a newspaper in a way that just like it would be like super rudimentary and like just contains all the information that we've journaled through our experience of like growing these things at home and what we've used them for. And yeah, because the project, the start of it, like I mentioned, was super personal to us, and we would just journal what we discovered about these plants and consuming them over the duration of like 3 months. And so we do have a lot of information that we are excited to share once the visuals are kind of put to it.
Yeah, I really like what I think what you both did. And Gabby, I don't know if maybe you can drop the link in the chat to where everyone can find the guide online so that they can look with us. But I think that visuals are so important to what both of you do. And I think, Ezekiel, I know you have a background in design. And like you said, you really want like it to be visually engaging to a specific demographic, but also visually accessible and interesting, which will get people engaged. So can you talk a little bit about like what are kind of the core driving things that are guiding JITS's development into this guide and this online and the branding? And I mean, this is such a beautiful illustration that you use as the logo.
Yeah, principles.
Sorry, I'm pulling out all the hard questions tonight.
I don't know. I guess it's like it's partially instinctual, right? Like there's a certain sensibility that I have based off of all the accumulation of like things that have affected me in my life. But I would say like, just to like make it a short answer, like it's a like, I don't have the answer immediately, honestly. But I would say like in general, in terms of creating something that's visually impactful, there has to be a level of intrigue. Meaning, usually for me, that comes from like introducing something strange or familiar in a strange way, or something familiar in a strange way.
Right. And Gabby, you also have like a very specific identity to Buenesas, and I'm sure the songbook that you're producing now for your new grant will as well. So can you talk a little bit about like the creative side of making this information and this kind of outcomes that are happening in the workshops, and how they become like a product in themselves?
Mhm. For me, like honestly, I get super caught on the aspect in that storytelling, you know, like making that day special, cooking something, like I get like that, like very excited, and then it's a little bit like more work for me to do the whole visual, because but I think it's important to like write it down, like all this information that we heard from like people that were around us. But it has taught me like this project also to let go a lot, because if I'm collaborating with so many people, like I might have an aesthetic, but like maybe, you know, like somebody else doesn't, and I don't want to be like, no, that's not like you know, art, or that's not artistic enough. Like I just yeah, like beautiful, you know, like I like to be very open to I mean, for the guide, I collaborated with Monica Isirovic and
Mhm.
Nicole Salcedo. I love everything that Nicole does. And also with my friend Patricia from We Collective. But yeah, like some of the writings, like people were just free to write whatever they wanted to submit. For the
Yeah.
songbook, that's another thing. Like, yeah, like maybe I wanted in my head the song to sound a way, you know, but it came out another way. So I'm like, but I'm, you know, I'm in that process of like appreciating everybody's creation and like co-creating, you know, like making it. And it's a very experimental too. For the songbook, I wanted it to be very decided. I'm not doing anything
Mhm.
digital. I'm really bad at like sitting down on the computer, so I'm gonna do everything, you know, like very old school with like, so let's see how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can you both, like I said, I think it's really nice that one, Gabby, that you were funded for a project, were able to complete it, and you got another grant for something different, and you have both have projects in progress that are completely unknown as to what the true final form will be like. But I think for a lot of people who are watching tonight, who are maybe possibly thinking of applying for an Ellie and might have ideas that range from a painting to some sort of workshop or education kind of space. Can you talk a little bit about what the Ellies has done for you? Like, what is your experience as artists working through a grant program like this, having such open-ended, really community engaged projects?
You can go first, Gabby, if you have a response.
Yeah. Well, for me, like having the you know, the economical support, like for me not to worry if people pay an entrance or not, you know, like I be able to invite anybody, have like food, or sometimes, you know, invite someone, an elder, to play music, have that freedom of like
Right.
being able to organize this and be able to compensate people, like, you know, and it's huge, you know, like I mean, I have a regular job, you know, like I don't go to galleries. I'm a little bit far away from, you know, the art world. So for me to be able to have the means to do a project is huge, you know, like I mean, it represents a lot for me. I was doing it out of pocket. So for me, like now it's like, okay, like I can focus on on the creative side or the organization, like the coordination.
And was 2019 the first year that you applied for the Ellies?
Yeah, it was the
Mhm.
first time. I never applied for anything in my life. Like
You
I
see,
did
guys,
apply,
don't be
yeah.
shy. Don't be
Yeah.
shy.
No,
Just apply.
seriously. I know if I did it, you can do it. No, like I did apply for by Miami-Dade public something like
Yeah.
it was like a public spaces. That was my first one. I'm like, oh, and I got super confident. I'm like, I'm gonna apply for the Ellies. But yeah, apply for it.
What about you, Ezekiel?
Yeah, I would say like the Ellie's kind of like it was cool to see that an organization or someone on the panel or whatever was supportive of my curiosity. I think that was the most encouraging and empowering thing about it at the top. And then to go further, I would say that so basically like we started this project with the intention of making money off of it by selling locally, but as the pandemic worsened and we had more kind of like constraints because of this idea of like delivering produce, and the hygiene of it and all of these things, I became less interested or kind of convinced that it would work, and I began to just focus more on the kind of like publication, educational, community outreach initiative side. And the funding that I received, like I wouldn't have been able to like mainly focus on that and like leave the other part of it actually becoming a business behind temporarily without the financial backing of the grant. So I think that was super important to me.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I think something you say, like, that shift that you made in the project when things changed in the world or the project grew or it got smaller or your situation changed, I think that's also like a really nice part of the Ellies is it understands that things change, like from the moment you put it on a piece of paper to when it has to become a reality. I think, for Gabby, Buenesas maybe was a small idea and now it's still happening 3 years later. And she's probably either seeking additional funds or has, ongoing supporters or, it's expanded outside of the scope of her thinking, I'm going to get a grant, I'm going to fund this for a year and I'm going to produce a book. I know there's a bunch of people, a bunch of my friends that go to the workshops and are still active, followers of Buenesas. And I think with the Ellies being such a simple application and really just at its core wanting to support artists' ideas and dreams, it does allow artists to like experiment and learn like the ins and outs of the growth of being an artist and trying to produce a project at different scales. But I do want to ask each of you before we close, and I want to just mention that Gabby dropped the link in the chat to her Buenesas guide. If you guys want to go ahead and click on that and see, you can see what came of that first 2019 project. But I do want to ask both of you before we close, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now. What outside of these projects are you working on? Like, what is the practice outside of these specific projects? Or is this kind of you at your core as an artist? Is this one particular moment in time? Ezekiel, do you have other things that you're working on that are more design based? I know you work collaboratively a lot, but I'm not sure if you're working towards something else for 2022.
Yeah. The transition from me, I moved back to New York, and I work a full-time job now. And right now I'm working on a film project that has nothing to do with JITs. I still micro farm like inside of my apartment and stuff. And that's been an interesting process. I'm also still in school, like architecture school. And so like these are, I think at the core of my interests, like you mentioned in the bio, the core of my interest is definitely representation and like fine art and design and stuff like that. I think that, yeah, I think about it all the time in retrospect. Like JITS, in my head, I was like, I never really wanted to be like a farmer. You know what I mean? Like I was like, it's definitely something for me to do, and I really enjoy doing it. But I think at the core, like I'm really interested in like communicating ideas through visuals and through art as a medium of communication. And so that's kind of what I'm focusing on now. Yeah,
Can you
is like
tell us what this film is about?
it's about heat.
Oh,
Yeah, in the broadest sense. So I've been, and as it's been getting warmer and it's been becoming spring and heading into summer, it's exciting also to just see like life come alive again and stuff like that, in the way that the dynamic of New York City changes. And also it's connected largely to the JITS kind of sensationalism of like life and birth and stuff like that. But
Sounds really beautiful.
yeah, I'm excited. I want to do like a huge screening for it. But I'll keep you guys posted on
Keep us
that.
posted, yeah.
Sure.
And Gabby, what about you? What are some of the other projects that you're working on right now besides the grandmother songbook?
oh my God, like I have like 5 jobs, 9 5 part-time. I'm working with an organization called SEPA, is Decolonized PR in Puerto Rico. And I work with them. I work in their garden and doing their medicinal herbs, but I also collaborate in any way I can. I work gardening. I work like in doing maintenance and stuff like that in gardens. And I work in Song of the Spirit with B. Anderson. She's based in Jamaica, but we work long distance, and it's an online, it's a space where we have a program of a lot of workshops and classes preserving indigenous traditions. And I work also with the Healing Justice Fund in Miami with FAMSAGE. They're a big family in Miami. So I'm hoping to do a lot of art programming and events with them this year. And yeah, and in the meantime, I'm also learning from different artists that are working with like pigments, plant pigments, and textiles, and with them looking for land so we can do, like, the ultimate goal is to have a space where we can do this like huge classroom where we can learn from the land, and we can also steward, and so I mean that little by little.
Yeah. You got a lot going on, but
Yeah.
no, that sounds great. That last idea with the pigments sounds like an Ellie's proposal. But you might have your hands full this year. She's like, no more. Well, I want to open it up to the audience. If anyone has questions, go ahead and send them our way. But if not, I don't want to hold these two too long. I do want to just like reiterate, like, I think you guys do a really great example of showing that like artist and art is such a loose definition. I think a lot of times people think of art as a painting or a photo or something that hangs in a gallery, but really it is just like an engagement point and a way to connect with one another and talk and discuss and learn together. So I think that you two are really great examples of what an idea can be and what it can become. And so anyone who's tuned in that's truly questioning whether or not they should stay up late and work on their application after work, or think if they should or should not submit based on whether or not they've shown in galleries, I really do think that the Ellies is a great way to just put an idea out there and hopefully get to make it a reality in some scale and some capacity. So I don't see any big questions from the audience, so I thank you both for joining me. Thank you so much for sharing so much about your projects and your experience. I'm really excited to see how both of these continue to take shape over the next year. And thank you all that have tuned in. Thanks so much. Good night.
Thank you.
We can go, right? Just wondering.
I don't know, I'm not sure.